I cheated with my best friend's father. I thought it was an impossible secret to discover, but my husband found proof, gathered the entire family, and revealed the truth that destroyed my life. I do not know exactly at what moment in my life everything began to fall apart, but if I had to choose a turning point, it would be that summer when everything seemed to spiral out of control within me. My name is Clara. I am 34 years old. I am a literature teacher at a private school in Belo Horizonte, and I have been married for almost 10 years to Daniel, a 36-year-old civil engineer, with a calm temperament and a loyalty that to this day pains me to remember. Our life always seemed stable to everyone. We were the couple that had barbecues on Sundays, went on vacation to the coast, took care of their dog together, and talked about having children soon. Outwardly, nothing indicated that anything was wrong, but inside, a feeling of emptiness invaded me like an ink stain on paper. Daniel was dedicated, perhaps even too much so. He spent hours immersed in work, reviewing projects and reports until late at night. He said he did all this to ensure us a comfortable life, but I missed his attention, his presence, his gestures that transcended routine. I tried to talk about it, but he always responded with the same calmness that in a way irritated me, saying, "Darling, it is just a phase, it will get better soon." But this phase seemed endless. I found myself more and more alone at home, with a partner physically present, but far from everything that mattered. It was in this context that the figure of Antonio emerged. He came into my life unexpectedly. He was the father of my best friend since adolescence, Julia. I had known Antonio for years, but always as that charming widowed gentleman who appeared from time to time at family gatherings. An educated man with an imposing presence, a charming conversationalist, and an almost hypnotic ability to make anyone feel heard. I had never seen him in any other way until that summer. We were at Julia's birthday party and Antonio arrived early, helping to set the tables, serving drinks, and telling jokes that made everyone laugh. When our gazes met for more than a few seconds, I felt an unease that I did not know how to interpret. That night, Daniel was as usual, chatting with colleagues who were also family friends, paying me almost no attention. Meanwhile, Antonio sat next to me, asked me how I was, and suddenly, he had me talking about my routine, my work, my feelings. He looked into my eyes in a way that made me forget the noise around me. I was not used to someone listening to every word with such intensity. It was just a conversation, but when I got home I lay down next to Daniel and felt my heart race as if I had experienced something forbidden just by talking to that man. In the following days I started to think about it a lot. I remembered his words, the way he brushed my arm when we laughed together, the genuine attention that seemed so rare in my life. I tried to push those thoughts away, but they kept coming back. Every time Julia mentioned something about her father, I felt butterflies in my stomach, and it left me confused, guilty, but also strangely alive. I knew I was crossing a dangerous line in my mind, but I could not help it. One Saturday, Julia invited me to have lunch at her house. I went without suspecting that Antonio would be there. When I arrived, he was in the garden pruning some plants. He smiled when he saw me, a warm smile that seemed to penetrate me. During lunch, our conversations mixed naturally, and I realized that he too was looking for any excuse to include me in his comments, to maintain eye contact. It became a silent game, a secret code that only we understood. In the end, when Julia went to answer her cell phone and left the room, Antonio came closer, lowered his voice and said, "Clara, you look different now. It seems like something inside you is asking for help." I was paralyzed. No one had ever expressed so precisely what I was feeling. I returned home that day with a mixture of fear and desire. I knew it was madness, a mistake, a betrayal in every sense, against Daniel, against my friend Julia, against the limits of my conscience. But at the same time, there was something intoxicating in the attention I was receiving. For the first time in years, I felt seen, and that feeling, as dirty and dangerous as it was, began to consume me, and that is how a spark turned into a fire. It did not take long for that spark to become something bigger, something I could no longer hide, not even from myself. After that lunch, I started looking for excuses to be with Antonio. Sometimes I made plans to stop by Julia's house, even when she was not there. Other times, he would accept invitations to small family gatherings that I would have previously declined. With each new encounter, the tension grew, as if we were dancing around a flame about to erupt. One day, Julia had to travel for a university conference and asked me to stop by her house to check on the dog. I accepted without hesitation, knowing that Antonio would be there. When I arrived, he greeted me with that same smile, full of an almost dangerous kindness. I petted the dog and we talked for a while until silence fell between us. It was a dense silence, full of unsaid things, and before I could react, he came closer, touched my face with a tenderness that broke me, and kissed me. It was a slow, deep kiss, charged with years of emotional absence on my part and something in him that I still did not understand. I felt my defenses crumbling as if everything were inevitable, as if it were written. When we pulled apart, I looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of my own conflict, desire and guilt mixing cruelly. We did not say anything for a few seconds. We just stood there, breathing heavily, aware of the abyss we were about to fall into. That night I did not sleep. Daniel arrived late, tired as always, and I lay staring at the ceiling, reliving every detail of that forbidden kiss. I wanted to believe it would end there, that there was still time to back out, but deep down I already knew there was no turning back. Antonio and I had opened a door that we could no longer close. The following encounters took place in silence, like a conspiracy against everything and everyone. We would invent trivial excuses, going to the supermarket, dropping something off quickly, an invitation for coffee. There was always a way to be alone for a few minutes, and in those minutes, the entire world would disappear. Our kisses became more intense, our bodies closer and closer, until one rainy afternoon we gave ourselves completely to each other. That afternoon was an explosion of repressed feelings. I felt as if I had been reborn, as if I were living for the first time in years. But at the same time, a part of me screamed in desperation. I was destroying everything I had built with Daniel, betraying the trust of my best friend, staining my own dignity. But when I was in Antonio's arms, all those voices seemed distant, muffled, irrelevant. Thus began what would become an intense, secret, and devastating affair. We always met in secret, always in different places, always careful not to be discovered. I would write more and more elaborate excuses for Daniel, and each lie seemed easier than the last. He, in turn, seemed to believe everything without question. Perhaps he was truly blinded by his trust in me, or perhaps he was too busy with work to see the signs. But secrets do not stay buried forever. And although I did not know it yet, every step I took brought me closer to the precipice. The following weeks were like walking a tightrope stretched over an abyss. Every encounter with Antonio seemed to drag me deeper into a whirlwind from which I could not escape. The desire grew like a fever, and with it, the constant feeling of being discovered. I lived on high alert. Any text message, any fixed gaze from Daniel, any innocent comment from Julia paralyzed me with fear, but still I kept going as if I had completely lost control, as if I were addicted to this secret. Antonio also seemed overcome. He would call me at unexpected hours, saying he thought of me every moment, that I had brought back the spark he thought was lost forever. And I believed him because I needed to believe in some justification that would give meaning to the chaos I was causing. There was something in him that made me feel alive, desired, important. With Daniel, I was the predictable wife, always attentive, always understanding. With Antonio, I was fire, risk, novelty, and this difference consumed me like an addictive drug. But the closer we got, the harder it became to hide. I started noticing strange looks from Julia when I insisted on showing up at her house for no reason. I started noticing Daniel's discreet questions about where I spent my time. I answered everything as naturally as possible, but inside I felt the ice of paranoia growing. Writing excuses was easy, but carrying the lie in every gesture, in every word, was suffocating. One day, during a normal dinner at home, Daniel asked me if I was happy. It was a simple but direct question that caught me off guard. With my mouth still full of rice, I froze. He waited for my answer in silence, his gaze fixed on mine. I forced a smile and said, "Of course, darling, I am just tired." He nodded slowly, but did not reply. We spent the rest of the night in silence, and that silence weighed on me like a stone. For the first time, I felt that maybe he knew something. That same week, something happened that made me realize the rope was about to break. Julia called me suddenly and asked in a light tone if I had seen her father lately. The phone almost fell from my hand. I made up every possible excuse, saying no, that we had only seen each other at casual events. She laughed and said, "It is just that he is acting different, he even seems younger." I was breathless. My friend had noticed the change in him, and I was the cause. Guilt mixed with fear in a way that kept me awake that night. But still, the next day I met with Antonio. I could not stop. It was as if every risk, every danger, only increased the attraction. We were both caught in a trap of our own making, and with each passing day, I knew the price would be higher. The most terrifying turn of events occurred on a Friday night. Daniel said he would be working late, and I took it as the perfect excuse to meet Antonio at a small apartment he had rented since his days in another city. It was a discreet, almost empty space, used only for occasional meetings with business colleagues. There we felt free, away from the world's gaze. We spent hours together that night, as if we were in a parallel universe. But just as I was about to leave, he took my hand and said seriously, "Clara, we have to think about the future. We cannot live in hiding forever." Those words struck me. Until then, I had treated it as a fervent secret, a forbidden addiction. I had never considered making it public official. The idea of destroying my marriage and my friendship with Julia seemed unthinkable, but at the same time, a part of me wondered if I would ever have the courage. I returned home with my mind racing and, upon opening the door, I was startled. Daniel was there, sitting on the sofa, waiting for me. I stood paralyzed. The clock read almost midnight, and he should have been working. My heart almost leaped out of my chest. He looked at me with a calmness that terrified me more than any shout. He asked if I had had fun with my friends. I pretended that I had, that we had gone to a bar after work. He just smiled slightly, a smile that did not reach his eyes, and said, "I see." Then he stood up and went to bed without another word. I knew in that instant that he was watching me. I did not know how or to what extent, but I was sure that something had changed. Over the following days, I started noticing small details. My phone was not where I had left it, Daniel's persistent glances when I had dressed up too much to go to the supermarket, seemingly innocent questions about Julia's and her father's schedules. He was connecting the dots. I told Antonio this nervously, but he told me not to worry, that I was just being paranoid. But I knew Daniel. He was not one to explode, he was one to accumulate in silence until the opportune moment, and that terrified me. The following week, Julia organized a dinner with friends and family. I hesitated to go, but Antonio insisted, saying there was no reason to be suspicious. So I went. During the dinner, I noticed Daniel was quieter than usual, observing everything around him. Every time my eyes met his, I felt as if he could read my soul. That night, when we got home, he said something that sent chills down my spine. He said, "Clara, do you know what hurts me the most? It is not the lie, it is knowing that you think I would never realize it." And then he went to bed, leaving me standing in the room, trembling, unable to respond. The feeling that the house of cards was about to collapse intensified in the following weeks. Daniel never brought up the matter again, but his silence was worse than any accusation. He treated me with a calculated coldness, as if he were giving me the rope to see how far I would go. I tried to act normally, but paranoia consumed my days and nights. Every time I left the house, I feared I was being followed. Every time I looked at my phone, I felt that Daniel knew exactly what I was doing. And then the inevitable happened. It was a Sunday afternoon at a lunch organized by Julia herself to celebrate her younger brother's birthday. I had been nervous since the morning with a bad feeling. When I arrived, I noticed there were more people than usual, cousins, uncles, even close neighbors. Antonio was there, of course, and our gazes crossed briefly, but we avoided any contact. Lunch proceeded normally until suddenly, Daniel stood up and asked for silence. My heart skipped a beat. He was holding a black folder, and without any preamble, he began to speak. He said, "Excuse me for interrupting the gathering, but everyone present needs to know the truth." The room was in shock. Julia looked at me, confused, and I felt my legs tremble. Daniel opened the folder and began to show printouts of messages, photos, and records of meetings. Proof that Antonio and I were seeing each other in secret. Every page he showed was like a sentence, and every glance around me was like a blade piercing my skin. Julia covered her mouth with her hands, completely shocked. Antonio tried to stand up, but Daniel was quicker. He said, "No, stay there. Everyone needs to know who you are and who she has become." The world collapsed in that instant. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up beneath my feet. Julia was crying, shouting at me, "How could you, Clara? How could you do this to me?" My family murmured, some outraged, others silent, shocked by the cruel spectacle Daniel had created. I could not speak. I could not defend myself. I could just face the raw reality in front of everyone. I had destroyed my marriage, the trust of my best friend, and my own reputation. When it was all over, Daniel simply said, "Now each one of you knows who she really is." And he left, leaving behind a deafening silence. In that moment, I understood that my life would never be the same again. After that fateful afternoon, nothing was ever right again. I became a kind of ghost in my own life. I left the lunch amidst shouts, looks of disgust, and a silence that burned me from the inside. Julia, the person who had been by my side through every stage of my life, did not even want to hear a word from me. She pushed me out of her house and, with tears and rage on her face, said she never wanted to see me again. The impact was so violent that for a moment I thought I would faint on the sidewalk. Antonio, for his part, said nothing. He simply lowered his head in shame and let the weight of the situation fall on me. I returned home in shock. Daniel was not there. On the living room table, there was only an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a short letter. It said, "Do not try to find me. I do not want explanations. You chose your path, and now you are going to live with it. The shame I felt in front of everyone is the last thing you will give me. Take care of yourself if you can." I felt a hole open up inside me. He did not yell, he did not break anything, he did not insult me. He simply left me with the most deafening silence I have ever experienced. In the days that followed, my life became a field of rubble. The rumors spread faster than any virus. My colleagues at work began to look at me with suspicion. Students whispered in the hallways. Neighbors avoided contact. The betrayal was not just against my husband, but against my best friend and, in a way, against an entire community that had always seen us as examples of family and friendship. I became the villain of the story, a target of judgment, jokes, and contempt. Antonio tried to contact me several times. He called me, left me messages, said he wanted to talk, that we could face this together, but I could no longer look at him without feeling a mixture of revulsion and desperation. Deep down, I knew it. He could simply move on with his life, as he was already a man marked by loss and difficult experiences. I could not. I had lost everything in a single afternoon. My marriage, my most precious friendship, my reputation, and even my dignity. Solitude was the cruelest punishment. I would spend hours sitting in the classroom with a lost gaze, remembering the scenes from the lunch, people's expressions, Julia's tears, Daniel's coldness. With each memory, my body trembled as if an electric shock were passing through me. Shame was a shadow that followed me everywhere. I could no longer go to the supermarket without imagining that everyone knew. I could no longer teach a class without feeling the judgment in the air. I had become a prisoner of my own choice, and the worst part was realizing that all of this could have been avoided. If only I had stopped at the first glance, at the first kiss, if only I had chosen the truth instead of the lie. But no. I kept pushing the boundaries, believing I had the situation under control, that I would never be discovered. Now, every misstep had an incalculable cost. What I did not expect was the intensity of Julia's reaction. In the days following the scandal, she blocked me on all social media, excluded me from my groups of friends, and even made sure to tell her version of the events to all our acquaintances. And I do not blame her. In fact, if I were in her place, I would do the same. But hearing other colleagues say things like, "You destroyed Julia's life. How did you have the courage to cheat on Daniel with her father?" It was like receiving daily slaps to the face. Antonio, though ashamed, tried to maintain some kind of contact. One day, he showed up at my door, insisting I open it. He said his own family was attacking him, that his children no longer wanted to speak to him, that Julia would never forgive him. He cried, saying he loved me, that we had to face this together, but I no longer believed him. That love now seemed just a pretext to justify the disaster we had caused. I slammed the door in his face, even with a heavy heart, because I knew I could not save anything that was left. Meanwhile, Daniel disappeared. Some mutual friends said he had taken time off work, others that he had traveled to the countryside. No one knew for sure, but his absence was even more painful than if he had been here. I had the absurd hope that one day he would listen to my apologies, not to forgive me, but at least to allow me to speak. But Daniel chose to silence me with his absence, and perhaps that was the cruelest revenge. With each passing day, the shame grew. I was called to a meeting at the school where the administration suggested I take a temporary leave to protect my image and that of the institution. I accepted without protest. At that moment, I realized I no longer had an identity beyond the scandal. I was the woman who cheated on her husband with her friend's father. Nothing more. Everything else had been erased. I spent days locked in my house, living on coffee and memories, trying to understand when I had lost myself. The silence was so dense that I would sometimes turn on the television just to hear voices. Every time I passed a mirror, I felt like smashing it. I no longer recognized myself. What was left of Clara? Only the shadow of someone who made bad decisions and was now paying the price. One morning, I hit rock bottom when I received an unexpected text message. It was from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart raced. It was Daniel. Brief and concise, the message simply said, "I found what I needed. Do not look for me again. To me, you are dead." I was paralyzed. Those words were stronger than any insult because they sealed the end of everything. He did not just want to leave, he wanted to erase my existence from his life, and perhaps that was the only way he found to protect himself. I cried for hours until I had no strength left. After that, something inside me broke completely. I understood there was no going back, that there was no solution, that there was no future in this. And for the first time, I realized that it was not just about losing Daniel or Julia, it was about losing myself. I had destroyed myself step by step while believing I was experiencing a forbidden passion. It was at that moment that I found myself at a crossroads, continue to be mired in shame and isolation, or try to rebuild something from the ruins. It would not be easy, it would not be quick, and perhaps it would never be complete, but it was the only way out. I started writing everything I felt in a notebook, without hiding anything. Every word was a way of confronting my mistakes, of not leaving them as mere ghosts in my head. Antonio never looked for me again after that. Perhaps he realized there was no more space for us, or perhaps he simply decided to preserve himself. Julia never spoke to me again, and I accept that she never will. Daniel, he disappeared as if he had been erased from the world, and I was left here with my life in pieces, trying to learn to breathe again. But even in the midst of so much emptiness, I began to realize something. Surviving is also a form of punishment and learning. And that was all I had left. The following months were a long, almost endless journey. Little by little, the scandal settled for others, but not for me. With every step, I felt someone whispering my name, that the laughter was directed at me, that the glances were invisible arrows stuck in my skin. I no longer needed anyone to accuse me, I did it to myself daily. Shame became my alarm clock and guilt my insomnia. I started living in a kind of bubble. I no longer had a job to occupy me, no friends to call, no husband to talk to. My mother, who had always been my support, would tell me on the phone to be strong. But even she seemed at a loss for words in the face of what I had done. I never heard her judge me directly, but the disappointment was there, hidden behind every brief phrase, and this disappointment, coming from the one who gave me life, hurt as much as anything else. It was in this emptiness that I found, almost desperately, an outlet in writing. I began to fill entire notebooks with memories, confessions, fears, all unfiltered. I wrote as if someone would read them, but at the same time knowing that no one should ever see those pages. I wrote as if I were bleeding onto the paper. It was the only way to keep going. With each sentence, I tried to understand not only what I had done, but also why I had done it. And the more I wrote, the more I realized that it was not just about Antonio, Daniel, or Julia. It was about me, about the emptiness I had carried for years and that I had tried to fill in a twisted, cruel, and unforgivable way. One night I dreamed of Julia. I dreamed that she came into my house, sat on the sofa, and looked at me in silence, without crying or screaming. When I woke up, I realized that that image would haunt me forever. The idea of having destroyed not only a friend's trust, but also the possibility of any reconciliation. Some wounds do not heal, not because they cannot, but because they should not. Antonio disappeared from my life like a shadow. I heard rumors that he was living in another city, that he had distanced himself even from his own daughter, unable to face the shame. Perhaps he too had condemned himself to a silent exile, but I did not think of him with longing or with love. I thought only with the weight of someone who knows this story should never have begun. He was not the great love of my life. He was not the right man at the wrong time. He was the mistake that exposed everything that was rotten inside me. Daniel remained a ghost. I never heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder if he has rebuilt his life in another city, if he has found someone else, if he has managed to heal from what I caused him. But deep down I know that for him I truly died, and maybe that is how it should be. I moved on in a strange way. I did not rebuild my reputation, I did not win back friends, I did not heal my wounds. I simply learned to walk among the rubble like someone who learns to live in a ruined city. Every step reminds me of what I lost, but also of what I can still choose from now on. Not to be forgiven, but not to repeat it. Looking back now, I realize that there is nothing more destructive than believing that our secrets are unbreakable. I believed I was in control, that my lies were perfect, that my ability to improvise would be enough to keep everything in order. But the truth is that secrets are like cracks in glass. No matter how small they seem, sooner or later they spread until everything shatters at once. And when that happens, only fragments remain. I lost everything that afternoon when Daniel gathered everyone to expose my betrayal, but more than losing, I understood that I never really had anything. A marriage sustained by silence, a friendship supported by betrayed trust, a passion fueled by lies. None of it was solid. None of it deserved to survive. What was left was a reflection of who I really was, someone capable of deceiving herself to the point of destroying not only others, but herself. I do not write this to justify myself. There is no justification. I write because somehow expressing my pain in words is the only way to understand what happened. Perhaps whoever reads this story will see themselves reflected in it and decide not to make the same mistake. Perhaps whoever has remained silent, keeping a secret, will understand that nothing stays hidden forever and that the pain of being discovered is infinitely greater than the courage to admit it before everything collapses. I know that many will judge me, condemn me, perhaps even hate me, but I also know that by sharing this experience I am offering something real, my failure, my downfall, my vulnerability. I have no future with Daniel. I have no way back with Julia. I do not even have the chance to clear my name, but I have the opportunity to warn, to show that every decision matters and that even the slightest deviation can become an abyss.